into order. Please take the roll.
Supervisor Borges.
Here.
Supervisor Short.
I'm here.
Supervisor Starkey.
Here.
Supervisor Howard.
Here.
Chair Wilson.
Here. If you'll please join us in the board in a moment of reflection, please. Thank you. Supervisor Starkey, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Do we have an introduction of any new employees?
We do. I'll go ahead. Good morning, board.
Good morning.
I'm pleased to introduce you to two of our newest human resources technicians. The primary role of the human resources technician is to assist in recruiting and onboarding of new employees. So it's an essential role in our division. And as you know, we've had some vacancies in those positions for quite some time. So we're very happy to have these two new employees on board. The first I'd like to introduce to you is Sierra Pearson. Sierra asked that I just speak on her behalf, so I'll share that she comes to us from the Department of Health and Human Services, where she worked briefly. Prior to that, she worked down in Chico at a human resources consulting firm. So she actually has a wide variety of experience in different human resources related disciplines. And then the other human resources technician I'd like to introduce to you today is Lupe, and Lupe would like to speak on her own behalf. So I will step to the side and allow her to do so.
Because I am fairly new. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and now I'm back in the workforce, and I look forward to in the county and seeing what's going on nowadays and being an inspiration and maybe a difference.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Good to meet you. County Council, is there anything to report out of closed session?
No, Chair.
Thank you. At this point in time, I request any deletions, corrections, additions from the board members to the agenda at this time. In order to add an item to the agenda, the matter must come before the attention of the county subsequent to the posting of the agenda, and the matter requires action before the next regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors. Any such action to report? Good morning.
Janelle Obenchain, Deputy Director of Public Health. And just to note that we found a clerical error in the board report for item number 6, Kingsview Telepsychiatric Services. The number of clients served in fiscal year 23-24 was 356, not 654 clients. We apologize for this error and ask this correction be noted so that the item can be considered for approval.
Thank you. Please note the correction. That is item number 6 in the consent agenda. Also to that end, item number 15 was a letter that we sent to the state. There is going to be a correction. The letter indicates Humboldt County. It should say Denmark County, and that'll be changed before the letter is sent out. Any other public comment? Having none, we'll receive brief announcements and reports from the members of the Board of Supervisors, and as tradition, please start with Supervisor Starkey.
Thank you. Since our last meeting, I did attend the groundbreaking ceremony for the Battery Point Apartments on G Street. There will be 41 senior and 121 family apartments that are being built that will be available for workforce housing, seniors, and affordable living. There's 1, 2, 3, and I believe 4-bedroom apartments that will be available. You have to have a certain income level in order to qualify, but it's adding definite housing to our very short stock. I attended virtually the Measure R committee. I'm really appreciative of the work that the Measure R committee does, and they have repeatedly been asking for signs or way to recognize the projects in which we are accomplishing things within the community with Measure R dollars, and so I'm hoping to see some of those requests come to fruition. We have a fund balance currently in Measure R for $4 million, and while I know we're holding out some of those to be for projects, there are some, I would like the committee to give some suggestions on how to allocate portions of this out for smaller, tangible projects that can be completed. So it's encourage the Measure R committee to begin to advise on how to use some of that fund balance. Of course, not all of it. I attended the subcommittee on teen court. We're moving along, developing a teen court program here in Del Norte County. I attended the RCRC conference in Sonoma County. And while the conference itself was pretty unremarkable for me, there were a lot of great things that happened there that I'm sure my colleagues will share. I did have a chance to meet with some rural supervisors who provided some input with regard to the Middle Mile Advisory Committee that I'm currently sitting on, and how they would like me to advocate stronger for them about their regions in the rural community to get the middle mile completed in those areas. I worked on some solutions. There's a Mary Adams Trail in Gasky. I was contacted by a constituent who says that the Mary Adams Trail is difficult to get down if you're elderly. Not that I know anything about that, but I was able to speak with the recreation management specialist, Carl Berkins, about the difficulty, and he said that USFS has very limited funds for them to do improvements for that. So together we've kind of came up with an idea that we would do a volunteer work day, maybe in the spring, for some of these trails leading down to the river, so that all of our residents can enjoy the river and maybe partner with the Redwood Parks Conservancy to get this type of things done. I went to an open house at the Animal Control and had a chance to talk with staff and volunteers. Animal Control, with the help of the Humane Society and Dogs of Del Norte, have done such a remarkable job cleaning up that area. Last year, if you recall, the board approved a volunteer donation from L&L Construction to remove all of the old cement from that area. They have since removed that. Hemmingson Concrete took it away, but now they have created this whole area for the kennels out there, and volunteers have actually done the majority of that work. They, of course, whenever you stop by, they have more ideas for you, and they ask for more things, which I'm perfectly okay, and I can be the spokesperson to bring it forward. One of the concerns is a video monitoring system out there. Their current system does not work all that great, and people often break into the facility and or just leave their dogs without the proper notification. And then also they're hoping to get some sort of trailer or separate building for intake for those dogs that come in without us knowing their history, or if the dogs are sick. And that's really important. If one dog gets kennel cough in those small little areas, then the entire dogs in that area are exposed to that. Sometimes there's upwards of 40 dogs in there. I attended yesterday a ceremony for the Hyuchi Bridge. It was a display that is new at the Hyuchi Cafe. I was honored to be invited to attend that. In 1989, the Hyuchi Bridge was replaced. It was being investigated to be replaced in 1987, and for 2 years they were doing the environmental assessments and all those things. And for those of you who've been here for a long time know that the Hyuchi Bridge used to have this cage up around. And when a truck was coming through, his crane caught on the cage, and it actually rendered the bridge unusable. So that sped up the plans. So yesterday we got to hear about the history of the bridge and see this new display. If you get a chance, go up to the Hyuchi Cafe. There's a display with the combination of the Historical Society to see that history about Del Norte County. And finally, I did attend yesterday a special session for interviewing for the Human Resources Director. We are very excited as a board that we are making this move to develop its own department for human resources, and we were able to interview some very, very good candidates, and hopefully we'll be able to present an announcement to the public soon on that, and that is my report.
Thank you. Supervisor Howard.
Thank you, Chair. As Supervisor Starkey mentioned, also attended the Battery Point Apartments grand opening. Really appreciated the city invite, and more importantly, sharing that grand plan with our community that's going to provide so many doors, especially affordable doors for folks here in our community that are struggling to find housing. In addition, attended both a presentation and had a chance to speak at the Agricultural and Natural Resources UC Cooperative Extension meeting up on South Fork of the Smith River. Jana Valenkovic brought the entire state team here of about 30 people to concentrate on effects of fire in Delaware County. It was a pretty impressive delegation of, in this case, educators and also professors that study fire and its impacts not only on the economy, but on forest health. And so I focused a lot of my presentation on the economy and the impacts in Delaware County from the Smith River Complex and how we're still feeling some of those impacts today in our decision-making and on policies. In addition, spent some time with the Del Norte Resource Conservation District, lining out a new position that we'll be flying shortly here for a manager for that RCD. In addition, attended the North Deal meeting, which is the California Department of Transportation's meeting for Humboldt and Del Norte County, where we discussed a lot of speed zone surveys that are taking place. Last chance grade, which you heard about during the last board report, where Adam Schiff and Congressman Thompson both attended the event up there, which they thought was very successful in daylighting our project on a federal level. So happy Supervisor Short and Supervisor Tarkey were able to attend that and really highlight our need for a workaround of last chance grade. In addition, also had a lot of discussion on a future of some signage that's going to be at our gateway entry points into California, both up past the tunnel on the border and on Highway 101. Hoping to have a look at what those gateway signs will be here in the next couple months, but they promise to be pretty amazing. Also attended the North Coast Unified Air Quality Management District meeting, attended a meeting of the Tri-Agency, which would essentially be the final meeting where we closed Tri-Agency. In addition, I participated in the HR interview process and also the Rural Counties meeting in Sonoma this week, which I thought was quite incredible, especially the highlighting of Del Norte County in a big way, both on agriculture and our relationship with Rikuzen Takata, Japan. I'll let Darren, as our representative to RCRC, go into more detail about the meeting, but I really appreciate the efforts of RCRC to lobby for us as a rural county here and get the exposure we did at the meeting with our fellow supervisors here at the state level. That's the end of my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor Short, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since our last meeting, I attended the North Coast EMS Medical Advisory Committee meeting and also our own Measure R Oversight and Advisory Committee meeting as well. And as Supervisor Howard mentioned, I attended the RCRC annual meeting with Supervisor Starkey and also Chair Wilson. We learned about a variety of subjects, clean energy generation and storage. I was kind of proud to see our chairman engage with the panelists and convey our rural situation to the panelists leading the conversation there. We heard our own Lake Alexander talk about regenerative agriculture. Senate Pro Tem Mike McGuire showed up, gave a short speech, and took a variety of questions from the members of rural counties from around the state. We had Jim Gallagher and Brian Daly show up and talk about their challenges and what they're working on representing rural areas in the state of California in the legislature. And we also heard about a pathway to sustainable forest management and how California basically, in a roundabout way, needs to get back into the logging business again and start clearing some fuels out of our forests. It was interesting to see one of the panelists who was a longtime guy in the logging business bring a board that he had bought from a local lumber supply store with a sticker on it that said sourced from New Zealand. Here in the heart of California, where we're just overrun with wood, it just does not make any sense. So he was trying to illustrate that and did a great job. He also had a huge binder that represented what it takes to complete a timber harvest plan, which seemed pretty on the verge of ridiculous. The kind of things that we have to jump through to get fuels out of our forests. So on Thursday morning last week, we did have a presentation about our sister city relationship with Ricas and Takeda. It was led by Supervisor Howard and also a delegation of 3 gentlemen from Ricas and Takeda that we've seen here before, Mayor Toba, Chairman Ito, and of course, Kiyoshi Murakami. Thank you. Appreciate that. They told the story, and it was really, really riveting. To go through the tsunami minute by minute was really really kind of heart wrenching, and the room was just eerily quiet as the story was told, and that really set the stage for that evening. The evening on Thursday is usually set for a charity basket auction. All the rural counties get together and provide a basket, and they're auctioned off, and the proceeds go to charity. Well, middle of the day, we found that we had an opportunity to put together a small basket for the Kamomi Foundation to support our kids going back and forth to Ricas and Takeda. So we threw together a small basket, and at the end of the night, the last item was that basket item for the Kamomi Foundation. When the 3 gentlemen from Ricas and Takeda found out that we had this opportunity, they also threw in basically everything but travel, trip to Japan, 3 days at a hotel, barbecue by the mayor, a trip out on an oyster fishing boat. I mean, they had a litany of things that they added to this small basket that we had put together here in Delaware County. And I should mention, Mike Koopman donated a fishing trip. Alexander's variety of their goods. Eric Wilson, donated a trip in the aquarium and some items from his gift shop. Seaquake donated as well, stuff like that. So can't say enough for those people who absolutely just jumped right in and said, absolutely, we will help support this. But when we got up and told the room what we had and what we were supporting, I can't even explain what happened. From all areas of the room, people raised their hands, said, I want to throw in, like some guys from Merced, I want to throw in a tour at my ranch and a barbecue, and another supervisor a stay at his cabin. Site Logic threw in a stay at a winery and a fishing trip, and people were coming up and saying, hey, this is too rich for me, but I want to throw $1,000 on top of this when it's all done, or $3,000 or $3,500. And I'm to find out later on, a regular staffer from RCRC, she threw in $500 on her own as well. But we ended up raising $31,000 for the Kamomi Foundation from everybody's donations and just their heartfelt generosity to the relationship and the opportunity for kids to go back and forth and foster that relationship. So I don't know how to explain the temperature of the room. Seemed like the room was on fire. Everybody was jumping up wanting to help out the Kamomi Foundation and the cause and that sister city relationship. So it was a great time, a great way to end that RCRC session, and I was just proud to be a part of that. And sorry for talking so long, but that is my report, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Borges. I was Also attended the groundbreaking, attended the final tri-agency meeting, had multiple discussions with different department heads, et cetera, over issues that we are addressing here. But going to RCRC, I made connections with several different county supervisors as well as individuals that are tightly connected with what we are currently pursuing, which is where Delaware County is going to be with economic development going forward since the dissolution of the tri-agency was finalized. So having those discussions, getting to meet with both state and federal, as well as NGOs that are currently engaged in and are part and party to economic development in this region, as well as that have access and services that will benefit us as we try to pursue going forward, either in the development of a plan for economic development, or when we're seeking out particular resources dealing with issues, whether it is dealing with fuel reduction, sea level rise, the dollars that are currently available for us for energy development and other projects as we look towards what are going to be our goals and objectives going forward with economic development and what it's going to look like in Delaware County. And so that is the one of the advantages of going to RCRC. I was fortunate enough, one of the projects that I have been looking at is trying to deal with changes in state legislation when it comes to the hindrances that mitigation causes for development in Delaware County in particular, because we have little land remaining that can be placed in or used for mitigation, what that is required and demanded by different agencies within both state and federal. And so looking towards and trying to find a way that this legislation could be got forward. So I talked with Senator Gallagher. He was very interested in hopefully hearing the proposals that we wish to go forward, and having someone that's willing to take your legislation forward is something that is critical if you're going to have any success in making these changes that would be beneficial to all of our communities, and especially when we're talking about economic development. And so those are the advantages of going out and having these abilities to meet and confer with our small rural counties, because we all share the same issues in many cases, and solutions are out there if you just are willing to talk to the individuals that are in the actions of trying to deal with the same problems that we are. And so it was beneficial. I appreciated the time there and being present at the moment when all of the generosity and the heartfelt desire of those other counties and other sponsors that were there at the RCRC event got caught up in the process of wanting to see this sister city and the Kamomi Festival and the Kamomi Foundation benefit from their charity and their gratitude for having heard the story, but pushing it forward. It was amazing. It was truly inspiring, and we were truly blessed to be able to come back and have that good news and be able to pass it on, and the fruits of that are going to be great going forward, I believe, as we can see our young people from our high school and the Japanese club traveling to Rickerson Takeda and having a cultural exchange, and the opportunities that so was demonstrated in many of the videos that we showed at the presentation, and was, I think, something that touched the hearts of the counties that were there and really spoke to them, and that's why they were so generous with their actions going forward to bring and raise that $31,000. And so I'm very thankful for that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
there's one more piece of this puzzle, and if I could ask Supervisor Howard to talk about the meeting with Caltrans that took the delegation to. It just really is a great piece of the sister city relationship puzzle and how we
Yeah.
can benefit.
No, thank you, Darren. I neglected to report out on that, I think is extremely important to mention. As you're aware, this county's been working on last chance grade for quite some period of time, and we have come down to the preferred alternative being a tunnel. Caltrans is in the process of investigating what it'd take to build this tunnel. A lot of the investigative work, because there are no tunnel makers essentially in the entire United States that could do this project, they're looking overseas to do the work, in particular in the UK, in Finland, and in Austria. It seems like an interesting place to go with not a whole lot of experience in those countries with geologic instability. And so in having conversations with Matt Brady, the director of Caltrans, we utilized our relationship, in this case with Japan, a country that is riddled with geologic instability, and more importantly, experienced in tunneling miles and miles over lengths of 300 miles in some cases of highway, and completing those projects in a 10-year span versus us taking 10 years just to get 1 mile done. Fortunately for us, Kiyoshi Murakami is very close friends and has relations with what their cabinet secretary equivalent is in the Ministry of Transportation. And we sat down with Director Brady to suggest that they pay a visit closer to us on a side of the ocean that has this experience. And so that is actually in the works for October of next year. And really fortunate that we could help make that connection and hopefully have a lower bid and a quicker construction time for this process to be completed. But appreciate you bringing that up, Supervisor Short.
And that brings us to our 1025 timed item. And this is an opportunity for members of the public who may address the board in matters that are within the jurisdiction of the board. If you are addressing the board regarding a matter listed on the agenda, you will be asked to hold your comments until the board takes up that matter. And please limit your comment to 3 minutes or less. Is there any public comment at this time?
If you come to the kitchens of my grandkids, you went too far. My name's Chris Huey. I'm in District 4. I have a little experience in gangs in my past history. The pictures you're looking at is Mexican Mafia riding behind the Roscoe old store, and the northern structure came and marked them all out. Now, that's not street gangs. That's Mafia. Eno should know what I'm talking about. Anybody in the prison system knows what I'm talking about. Anybody in a gang unit knows what I'm talking about. These aren't kids with skateboards. These aren't a little street gang you got. This is Mexican Mafia. Everybody knows the Mexican Mafia, correct? Movies, La M. They're making a base in this city from Harding to Washington west. The stop sign's got it to 13 on it. They're marked out with 14. If you look at the writings, the 14 marks out to 13, put 187, which is we're going to kill you if you keep doing this. This goes from Harding to Washington. If you go behind the Patriot gas station, there's that white fence. All that is Mexican Mafia and northern structure writing. It has to be removed. I would say the county gets a hold of somebody to remove it. But it's not even that case of just removing it. They're putting a foothold here. I've walked this city for 9 years. I've never seen that writing before. I've seen kid graffiti, stupid graffiti writing, but this is actually northern structure. You can't put the SUR down, which is a short for Sereno, which is a soldier for the Mexican Mafia, unless you've earned that rank. And you only earn that rank by killing people for the Mafia. The 2 lines and the 3 dots, that's the Aztec letter, Aztec number 13, which represents the M, which is Mexican Mafia. Everything you see with 13 scratched out, everything you see with 13 is Mexican Mafia. It's not a street gang. Everything you see with 14 is the Northern Familia, which is the northern structure, which is the opposite against them. If the sheriff's department would raid the houses that are writing these words, the Serenos, the 2 lines, the 3 dots, every one of those houses is going to have illegal firearms, felony in possession of firearms, narcotics, and probably sex trafficking, because that's what they do, and that's all they do. They don't do nothing else but criminal enterprise. That's it. And I haven't seen the graffiti the whole time I've been in the city for 9 years, except 9 months ago is when it started. So somebody moved into this county, and somebody's trying to take over from Harding to Washington to the ocean. Some street gang is, or not a street gang, but a prison gang is. And I don't know if the county sheriffs understand, but you'll see on one of the writings, if you scroll, it's not only, that's just behind Roscoe, it's also, I got 3 or 4 locations. If you look at the CCC, it's called CCVL. They mark it out, and Retainers are marking it out, putting kill notices. Anything that says 187, penal code for murder. They want to murder these people. That CCVL is Crescent City Vario Locals. You guys know that? You guys should know that. That's part of the Mexican Mafia now, because it says CVL 13, Crescent City Vario Locals 13. And I only know this by reading the writing. I'm not in the gangs unit, I'm nothing. I was walking the streets. I only have a minute. Gotta take a couple seconds over. The reason this needs to be the nail in the butt, we're gonna turn into LA. These people will kill each other. And there's an academy, a little school academy across Washington. Right across that fence is all that graffiti. If they do a shootout there and kill one of those kids, it's our fault for not sitting there not trying to deal with this issue. So if you can find out who's doing the graffiti, you can't put those markings to be nobody. You can't be a little street gang member, and he'll let you know. Serranios, you can't just put that on a wall unless you're Serrano. The 2 lines and 3 dots, you can't put that on the wall unless you've murdered or worked for the
Thank you.
Mexican Mafia.
Appreciate
Okay.
it.
All right.
You have your own.
Public comment. I'm glad that animal control and the care of the county's population of dogs and other animals is so high on the priority list in the county that we can't get any attention from the 5 members of this board to the plight that the Sheriff's Department currently occupies. I think over the last 9 months, I suppose, coming to this board meeting, it's certainly been clear that while we can protect animals, we can't seem to provide for the safety and security of our own citizens. And I would think that that would rank as a higher priority than certainly animal control, but apparently we have to wait 5 months for a compensation study before this board is even intending to act on the dire state of deputy patrol in the county and the fact that the sheriff cannot keep deputies for any longer than it's necessary for them to gain enough experience to move on to other counties, can't seem to understand that the current rate of compensation for the deputies is no longer acceptable, that we constantly get upstaged by other jurisdictions that seem to be able to have the Sheriff's Department a higher state of priority than Del Norte County and seem to be able to find the funding to address that issue. You currently have $4 million in the Measure R funding, which is tucked away for what reason, I have no idea, but it would seem that when you promised in 2020, the summer of, prior to the election or the passage of Measure R, that the Sheriff's Department would have some sort of priority in that regard. Where that's gone, I have no idea, but if you have $4 million and you're sitting on it, it would seem like a smart move to try to get ahead of the fact that by 5 months from now, you are unlikely to be able to compete for deputy sheriffs in any sensible kind of fashion. Seem like now is the time to address the issue. Seems like 9 months ago was the time to address the issue. Seems like years ago it was time to address the issue. So I'm glad that the animals out of animal control are secure and safe, but this county, this population is not. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, bring it back. It is time for our 10:30. We are pleased to invite SiteLog IQ presentation on building community resilience from natural disasters in Delaware County Community Microgrid. We have Dr. Eddie Jordan, Vice President of West Division, Taylor Boyle, Director of Project Development, and Christy Conlon, California Government Affairs and Community Development. Welcome.
Thank you so very much for having us this morning and providing the opportunity, Chair Wilson and our esteemed board. We could not be more grateful. And also alongside of the community members and partners in the room today. If we can run through, I promise we won't spend too much time on the slides. I know they've been provided in the board packet as well as the full agenda overview. But more than anything, wanted to start off by looking at sharing with and leveling up as a community with County of Del Norte, the partnerships, long-standing, forever partnerships with City of Crescent City, the County Office of Ed, as well as Sutter Coast Hospitals as key stakeholders, partners in this community, along with our incredible tribal gov partners. Today, if we can jump to, do I have a slide bump here? Maybe, thank you. Just a brief overview. Wanted to touch on building community resiliency, and that is our expertise is working in and with alongside of our rural counties, special districts, our cities up in the north and rural side, as well as our tribal governments and K-12 schools. Over the years, our team, if we jump to the next slide, which includes Dr. Eddie Jordan. He wasn't able to join us this morning, but I'm extraordinarily pleased to have our Director of Project Development, Taylor Boyle. She and our entire team of in-house engineers, architects, designers, energy and efficiency experts, including backup generation, hydro, floating solar, all of the gamuts of the technology, and especially our EV infrastructure, and water, especially critical to our rural counties and wastewater systems that we so proudly have the opportunity to design, build across our communities. And the North State is home to both Taylor, Eddie, and I, but especially working alongside my entire career, coming from county staff to city staff over in Shasta, and prior to that with the Department of Defense, but couldn't be more thrilled to bring solutions forward and to know after the relentless catastrophic events that our rural northern counties have been faced with. Obviously, we're right on the heels of the 2023 Smith River Complex. We've had extraordinarily heavy winter storms. I swear we were floating down from Crescent City in the atmospheric river all the way down to the bay in Mendocino County earlier this year. And of course, I would be absolutely remiss if I didn't recognize the two most recent 2006 and 11 tsunamis, along with the earthquakes that have rocked our coastline. It is for all of those reasons that we know our local schools, our rural hospitals, our county OES, knowing that our fire, public safety, emergency services, and of course our schools, right? By day, we're at work serving the community. You all are serving relentlessly to protect the health and safety of the County of Del Norte. City Council the same with the constituents within the city limits. But we know that if we are not rallying together in our small rural communities, we don't stand a chance. So that's where we have seen our rurals rise. And so today we'll touch base on very exciting collaboration and opportunity. We've been just in early conversations, exploration, after we made through a full run with PG&E and Edison's version of the microgrid incentive program. Unfortunately, under Senate Bill 1339, that was through CPC in consultation with the Energy Commission, bringing over $200 million to build microgrids throughout California, targeting communities that struggle with redundancy, resiliency, communities just like yours that are at the end of the line, right? What was extremely unfortunate while we are working with counties, cities, and 2 tribal governments in Northern California and even especially Greenville, which many of you know are supervisors and county partners in Plumas, where that community was completely annihilated in 10 minutes. So rebuilding smart underground utilities, PG&E's all in, but we couldn't be more thrilled and being a part of those solutions. So with that, we, wanted to work to be trailblazers and lead the charge in bringing together incredible partners such as Pac Power. Jill Drinkwater is your liaison, or regional liaison. She's been incredible to work with already. We are very much looking forward to next week. I believe he's landing here in Del Norte, but their new president, Ryan Flynn. And it will take, incredible collaboration, as there are your local utility providers. So we encountered, obviously, everything south of Siskiyou and Del Norte is PG&E land that I have had the pleasure of working in the trenches with and alongside of. But in the north here, we've got Pac Power, and you are their two key counties, and we're really hopeful that they will be on board with us as we bring along our full team at SiteLogic, which delivers the one only U.S.-owned, NAESCO certified, green build, clean energy energy company, but it's in building and developing resiliency. So this slide, just lightly, I don't want to get too far into the technical side, but really, what is resiliency? What is sustainability? So what we know, and we'll look at in a few slides, Taylor will touch base on what your annual budget is. As a county, as a city, even our rural hospital, our local schools and Office of Education, one of the largest line items, sadly, in our rural counties is the cost of our utilities. What's it cost PG&E, or Pac Power in this case, to run and operate, to keep the lights on, to have backup, if you have it, in your fire stations, police stations, your jails, your health and human services, for our schools. During these last few incidents, thank goodness for the tight-knit fabric of this community and being able to host at the Office of Ed and district office over there off Washington, really a resiliency hub is what it served as. It may have been temporary, and while the community was in great distress, but the lights were on, they had backup power, they've got Wi-Fi, you were able to connect and keep your comms and emergency services operating. But with that, it's a prime example of shifting, instead of that check and that annual spend on utility costs outright, but doing a smarter long-term approach to give you sustainable budgeting, reducing operating and maintenance costs on outdated. It can come down to lighting improvements, your HVAC, air conditioning, heating units. It can be your generators that you're trying to purchase to keep back up at, sometimes close to 100 or hundreds of county and city facilities. But really it's shifting, instead of those dollars going to pay a utility bill, it's investing in your energy independence, you owning your system, and reducing your carbon footprint, reducing your usage on the regular. And it is a huge win on the flip side, because it's of great benefit to your utility, because it's a lighter load, right? If we're all more efficient on that, it's less of a load on Pac Power. And if we're able to build and explore microgrids and backup power for your critical sites, they're not shipping in generators. They're not trying to fuel generators. And as we all know, even at our homes and small businesses, when the power's out, even at gas stations, fuel pumps aren't pumping because the power's down and we're in PSPS and it's critical times. So we want to look and explore a more resilient, sustainable option for Del Norte as a county, along with your key collaborative partners, to literally flip the switch and rock and power up your microgrid to keep operations running in your community safe and steady. So brief touch there. As I've already touched on one note, and then I'll kick to Taylor in just a moment. But we know just year over year, and it's the cost of doing business. And believe me, it's not a surprise to anyone in the room. We live, reside, work, play, raise our families and businesses in California. But what we know is, believe me, you should be very grateful that you have Pac Power They are much more stable, reliable, and the rates have not increased at the level of PG&E. But even still, we know that our rural counties typically live on a pretty flat budget, right? It's property tax base and so forth, but utility costs still continue to rise, and sometimes annually it's 12%, as in this case. Other counties, communities, there are 3, 4, 5 rate increases this year, and it's over 30%. That's unsustainable. And if you don't have revenue climbing, how are we ever, as rural communities and counties, and even businesses and nonprofit hospitals and schools, supposed to keep pace? So we're thrilled to provide some smart solutions, self-funded solutions. All of our projects with our local governments, cities, counties, tribes, we work with 3,600 special districts. You'll hear from one today as well. But what we know is we've got to take our future, our sustainability for your local budgets, your local community, into local hands. And we have a whole lot of strong partnerships, obviously, on funding solutions as well. But on delivering that news and what is a microgrid and what would this look like in Del Norte County, would love to take the mic to Taylor Boyle.
Yep. So with the microgrid, essentially you have several different types of microgrids. How you can set them up looks different in each case-by-case scenario. You can target one facility, or like we've done with some of these microgrid incentive programs, we're targeting community centers or overall like town centers, right? You might have your whole downtown backed up. So as you can see here, you'll have like a generator, some solar, different generation sources. You know, here where you do have quite a bit of fog in the morning, we'll have to have more resilience and, redundancy in those sources, whether it be a generator, solar, battery backup to store your excess energy, and then all of those microgrid components will then be backing up your community infrastructure, whether that be your schools, hospitals, grocery stores, gas stations, all of the critical needs that you have in your community. So that's generally what a microgrid is, and that's what we're looking at designing for your community to help with resilience during power outages or disasters and situations that you might encounter.
And then as we looked locally and met just in very early stages, and this was primarily prompted by and by follow-on with the microgrid incentive program that we've been design building for communities. And when we looked, talked, heard on the floor at the RCRC, CSAC meetings, and of course with Mike McGuire and our legislative leaders that I have long worked close with, we knew the needs up here on the coast were great, but the solution really wasn't that far out of reach. And so if you can imagine on this, I know it's small on the screen, but your community, your county, your city, but really that would be looping in your local fire station. So it's isolating critical pockets within your community. We've really highlighted 2 already that are perfectly fitting and would be in close proximity to Pac Power's substations. So the Belmont station is located off Washington Boulevard. In that one vicinity, it not only has already what's been coined, your local Office of Ed, district office, resiliency center or hub. We just want to help beef that up, soup it up, so that we can release or increase the reliability and resiliency there, advance the technology to a greater, more sustainable level, but loop in as well the area gas station. There's a hardware store. We know that in critical situations, in emergencies, by golly, we want our hospital up and running, right? You may have folks in the middle of surgery. You may have injuries from a fire or from an incident. They need critical care. So we are thrilled in what we saw and have just early scoped and exploring and hoping, today to have the opportunity to explore further and with collaborative partners. But it would also loop in your Sutter Coast Hospital as well as comm centers with police and fire, OES, as well as Pac Power and Charter. Imagine that, how lucky, truly, to have those key services, critical and essential services, in one boundary, as we would call it, a microgrid boundary. So that was first look, and then we know too, at the south end of town, which we'll get a more live feed image up in just a few moments, but the south end of town, we know that the city as obviously is providing your wastewater services. Believe me, you and everyone else along the coast, we want our water and wastewater to be flowing in the right directions, right? And especially during disasters and along your harbor. And so what we knew down on this end of town is obviously your county office here, your administration. When you're running HR, staffing, your payroll, people still need to get paid. The county's bills still need to be paid. And so when we looked at City Hall, county office, the wastewater treatment plant, we see, also an opportunity for almost a two-part system to ensure that we are further developing and including those continuous critical health, safety, and those quality of life services that we all rely on as businesses and members of the community. As well, to note a couple of the community benefits, we covered most of them already, but one item that we didn't touch on is the importance of your economy and what drives tourism, economic development. Our folks not only, we don't want to only talk natural disasters and crisis and recovery mode, but even just the day-to-day. If line goes down, you guys have one line coming into this county, and if that line goes down, you're all in the dark, which is a really scary situation for your full economy, your full operations. And we talked recently with Jeff Harris with the Office of Ed and school districts. The loss of one day with students being in class is over $267,000. And so that is just in one day of class being dismissed due to power outage or no heat or no lighting in the classroom, no ability to provide transportation, meals, which are mandatory by the state to feed children every day and staff now. But with that, you think of all the parents that aren't able to go to work that day because someone's got to care for their kids. So the economic, force and importance of reliability, I can tell you as well, the counties, cities, and tribal governments where we're designing and building microgrids across the North State right now, they know economically they will be a destination where businesses want to open shop because they want reliability. If you were looking for a manufacturer, believe you and me, they want lines running. Tourism, they want to stay where the lights are on and services are going, not in a constant flex mode or brownout mode. So I promise this is not a budget meeting. So do not fear, but I will pass back to Taylor just to touch on just a few of the key facilities and even just the baseline, budget look on some of the cost savings and opportunities for putting those general fund dollars where the county needs it most, whether that be staffing and personnel or other capital improvements. But Taylor, it's all yours.
So far we're talking about your overall community involvement in this microgrid. Now we're going to take a little snapshot into the county's benefits directly. So annually you're spending over $200,000 on your utility cost. We know that cost is rising, as Christy touched on earlier, with the PAC Power raises their rates as well, and there's been changes in the way that they produce power that could impact their rates down the line. So right now you're spending over $200,000. Your key energy hogs, if you will, are the sheriff's office and jail, the airport, and then this building that we're standing in today. These are your top energy usage buildings. So we have the ability to look at energy conservation measures on the building and site level basis, and then how that integrates into your overall microgrid to ensure that when you're backing up power, you're at least backing up the least amount of power possible, right? So you can minimize, reduce first, and then provide the resilience overall. So as we've been discussing so far today, this is going to take your whole community with the microgrid effort. There's, whether it's these organizations you see here, the county, city, school district, hospital, all of your local community, this is a community effort really. And as the county elected leaders, taking this initiative into your hands and also being a leader on this is going to trickle down to all of your community to ensure overall resilience through those outages or overall economic development and benefit down the line. So it is going to take the overall community and also the outreach with Pacific Power to develop special programs or leverage special funding sources for this program. And then as we start to look at microgrids, we did look at your specific facilities. We made a whole geo map of each county, hospital, city, and school district properties and where they lie to understand which facilities we can potentially back up within these microgrids. We identified 2 specific areas that seem to be, the ideal areas to back up into chunks, because the larger you go, the more obviously solar battery generator size you'll need to back up those specific areas. But we have 2 chunks that we think could be a good starting place. Later on, there might be potential to back up full substation level. So anything, down, like basically your whole community could be backed up. But to start out, to make it more digestible, we're looking here at your area near the harbor in downtown. So as you can see here, we have it color coordinated based on each organization. So there's school districts in here. You have your wastewater treatment plant facility, also the kind of RV park where you have tourism coming in, part of that economic development. So this area, we do understand it's in the tsunami flood zone, so there might be some challenges that we'll have to face, but that is something that we're thinking about already up front. And then this area is maybe a opportunity for the first phase of the microgrid, as it is, a little bit higher up, a little bit more resilient to those potential flood events. And in this area, you have, the school district and the substation itself is over here. You have the hospital. You have several critical facilities in this area that would be a really critical component to back up for your first pass of overall community resilience. Pull Christy back up for this.
Back in. And this is just really outlining, as I shared earlier, the Government Code 4217, which is the government code in the state of California. It's also public health safety code as well, but it is the legislation that was brought forward. As you know, we get in California just a few hundred, sometimes thousands of bills through our Capitol each year. We are very much leaders in climate action, resiliency, but the Government Code 4217 is a requirement that with these projects, they are self-funded, which means over the life of them, 30 years typically, that they bring net savings, but that are truly funded and delivering through federal, state grants, low interest loans. We had recent meetings at RCRC. We were able to convene and provide introductions to some of the county staff as well as leaders with our beloved USDA director, Gallegos Herrera. And she is all in and exploring as well any of the programs, opportunities that she can, with her office, with the federal USDA, provide in securing and ensuring critical infrastructure for your water, your wastewater, and especially, which was a big win, is what they consider, which of course falls under, the work we do every day and our projects, which we are 100% on with our CEC applications and delivering clean energy self-funded projects. So it's not, huge debt service to our communities and rural counties. But with the community resiliency hubs and centers, and that would include what we're looking at here in the form of microgrids and those essential services. That's the good news, and auditors, and I can tell you after working in city halls and county offices, you need to know that these projects pencil out and that you're able to self-fund and deliver those savings back into your general budget where you need it most. So we'll just wrap here with our roadmap to your Del Norte community microgrid. And as we touched on a couple of these points, just the absolute, vital partnership that we are hoping for and looking to continue with Pacific Power, both here in Del Norte and, of course, with your neighbors in Siskiyou as well. And then, obviously, our ability, it's what our Site Logic team does best in working with your county staff, is exploring any and all funding opportunities. So whether that's CEC grant, USDA, FEMA BRIC, it's across the board available. But as you know, it's like critical timing and on the cusp and follow on after natural disasters. There's these windows of time where there's funding available, and then sometimes it disappears for 10 years plus. But we know qualifying factors such as your Smith River complex, as well as the earthquakes, winter storms, and tsunamis. We will lift every rock and work collaboratively with your team to find those funding solutions for the project. And lastly, designing and developing it. So it's building that resiliency, and obviously that would be at the pleasure of the board and the level of interest in pursuing next steps or exploring that with us. But truly, it's been an honor to spend some time today with the board, county staff, but especially, want to tip our hat to you as you have served relentlessly, day in, day out. And you too, as we heard at the RCRC conference, it hits home with public servants, is that you choose every day to serve every constituent in your county. And at times that's a sacrifice from your family, from your business, from your day jobs, night jobs. But more than anything, we would be honored to stand shoulder to shoulder with you and better serving and building resiliency and sustainability for your county that will serve generations to come and really help drive your economy and your critical public health and safety services for long haul.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to back up some because, this discussion really involves the issue around redundancy. And as we learned during the Smith River complex, we're extremely vulnerable as a county. And that was just to a fire. Obviously, that's not the only natural disaster we face. And the threat of earthquake and tsunami is very real and has happened in all our tenures here in this county. If some of those things do occur, our ability to provide that redundancy essentially through power has been extremely limited and not recognized over the last several decades by our previous administrations, including myself, until an event like this wakes us up. And it's those events that wake us up that cause us to move into action. We've been fortunate with the Smith River Complex to get that wake-up call, but it allowed us to rally the troops essentially to ask the question, how are we going to provide power if power is disconnected? In talking with Pacific Power, they've been incredible partners. Partners that only have a customer base of about 56,000 between Del Norte and Siskiyou County. It's not a lot of money that pipes into infrastructure replacement or upgrades or providing redundancy on systems. Although those discussions are taking place that would reconnect us to Curry County through the lines that were severed in 1964, those projects cost a tremendous amount of dollars in the neighborhood of 80 to 90 million. It doesn't come along quick, and our 56,000 customer base between Siskiyou and Del Norte doesn't really provide for a quick movement on that without us finding the dollars to do so. So how do we find that redundancy? And more importantly, how do we find that redundancy with our critical infrastructure? And the Site Logic team went through what that critical infrastructure is. It's really our essential services, our hospitals, those community hubs essentially that provide communication, our OES, our sheriff's department, and the jail facilities, those things that keep our community safe in time of disaster. And so in order to speed up this timeline, and working with Site Logic, it really made a lot of sense to start looking at it on a shorter time period, because I don't think, even with Pacific Power's willingness, they're gonna be able to pull the trigger for us with a Curry County connection within the next decade without a major lift from the federal government. This takes us to a position with working together with our partners at Sutter Coast Hospital, Delnart Unified School District, and the City of Crescent City. It focuses all our energy in a combined way on those essential services and allows us to take that next step towards redundancy and resiliency. And it does it in a cost-effective manner, I believe. And so in learning some of these processes here over the last several months, I thought it was time to bring this to our board, because I know you all have been through this with me last year. And how do we get there together with our team members that also provide those same critical essential services to our county? And so I just wanted to make that statement and provide some context, which has been driving this conversation personally for me.
Any questions? No. It is one of the major concerns that we were tasked to resolve. It's one of the issues of energy redundance. This is a solution to the critical infrastructure. It is not a solution to general secondary power, but it is a solution to what critical services that we may need and know we need to have stable energy provided, so that those services, like we found out when we lost those services, how quickly the systems failed us, whether it was cell service, whether it was communications, radio communications, whether it was just everything from 911 all the way through collapsed on us. And so to have a resource and a plan looking at alternatives to that is absolutely critical, and I appreciate your presentation. Thank you. Any questions from the public?
Thank you. And I did want to share also, we were grateful to see him join us today and to hear the presentation, but Greg Orsini from nearby McKinleyville also wanted to share and impart a few comments on their project when at the board's pleasure.
Thank you.
I'm in no way dismissive of this effort that you're trying to make here to provide an alternative way to have power in the county should the main provider fail. I would like to point out that I've lived in this county for 50 years, and other than last summer's event, the power lossage in this county has, for the most part, been less than 48 hours. So for 50 years, we haven't needed a redundancy of any fashion. And currently, during the recent events of last summer, with regards to power, I'm totally on my own. The county did not provide any assistance to me whatsoever. A microgrid, I doubt, would offer any alternative to me in any way, shape, or form because of where I live. And I'm saying that probably a majority of the county outside the city limits and perhaps a few of the residential areas would find themselves in a similar situation. So it boils down to, if we only have this event once every 50 years, how much is this going to cost us to provide that redundancy for once in 50 years? And if you have something other than a fire which takes down the primary line, how sustainable is that microgrid going to be when you have an earthquake or a major disaster which basically wipes out a large percentage of the infrastructure here in this community? How valuable is that microgrid going to be to us, and especially when you consider the cost of that microgrid, because nothing is free, and it is likely to be a substantial cost to somebody. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you please, your experience in McKinneyville would be very valuable here. Thanks.
Chair, Board of Supervisors, thank you very much for
allowing me to come up here and sing the praises of a project that's near and dear to my heart in McKinleyville, California. This project started in 2006, and it came to fruition about springtime of this year. My name is Greg Orsini. I live in McKinleyville, California. I'm on the board of directors for McKinleyville Community Services District. I'm also was the operations director and the general manager. I spent the last 8 years of my tenure with McKinleyville Community Services District as their operations director. During that period of time, we were forced to upgrade our wastewater management facility. We had a facultative pond system, very passive, sun, a little bit of aeration, but about a $3,000 a month power bill. The Regional Water Quality Control Board, we discharge into the Mad River, so the Regional Water Quality Control Board wanted us to upgrade our system. We went to a mechanical system. Our power bills were projected to go from $4,000 a month, which ends up, whatever that ends up being, $4,800 a year to $160,000 a year. Our community always was pressuring our board, me now, to do a solar project. It just never worked out. We weren't spending enough money. It was never going to pencil out. But when we got that big power bill, it started to look like it was realistically could happen. And so we started down the road of looking at solar. As we learned more and more about it, we realized that solar is not the answer. You have to have a microgrid because you have to, if you want the resiliency, you have to have the microgrid. You also have to, so our system has solar panels, it has battery backup, and it also has an emergency diesel generator. You need all three of those for resiliency. I'll tell you right now that if you don't plan to have multiple means of power, you're going to get caught short. So McKinleyville and Humboldt County, we're very much like you are here. We have a lot of the same hazards that we have to deal with. I happened to be on a motorcycle ride last year and got stuck in Grants Pass when the Smith River Complex fire started and they closed 199. We had another night that my wife wanted to go beachcombing in Gold's Beach, so back up to Roseburg, across the Bannon, and back down to Gold's Beach for that day. And then when we rode through Crescent City the day after that, we saw the effect that fire had on you guys, and it was pretty bleak, to say the least. So we also share grid reliability issues. We're located in a peak or issues with seismic vulnerabilities, and to compound that here in Crescent City with the tsunami risks that you guys have. We're struggling to pay for our infrastructure now. The costs are skyrocketing for redoing our infrastructure, upgrading and renewing our infrastructure, and our utility costs they're going one direction and it's not going down. So that's a very important thing. So I would like to give I'll just do a brief on our project, because I'm here today to tell you that this is possible, that you don't have to do it because it's the right thing to do. You can do it because it's financially sound decision for your community, for resiliency, and you can and it will pencil out. And since we're both relative to the coast in the same spot, solar will work here. The fog clouds, it'll still work here. So as I said, our power bills were projected to go to $160,000. Our system is a half a megawatt. It's 500,000 kilowatts. We have 712 kilowatt hours of battery storage. That's going to be an issue because the batteries are going to be one of the things that's going to be the cost limiting factor. The batteries are really expensive. So at some point during this decision, you're going to have to decide how much battery backup you want. So that's a very crucial thing to keep in mind, because the project can become cost prohibitive if you choose to have too much battery backup. We also have a 500 kilowatt generator, and we're tied to the PG&E grid, and that all works together, and it's seamless. Our operators go down there and they've got a display in the morning that's a Windows-based display, and they can look at it and they can see how everything's going, the charging of the batteries, how much the sunlight we're taking in, the production of the solar panels, and where we're at with the grid. Let's see, just to kind of give you a feel for what we produce there. We have a half a megawatt, and we produce, our energy demand's about 66,000 kilowatt hours per month, and in the summertime we produce 19,000 kilowatt hours more than we consume. So that kind of can give you a feel of how this all works, and the fact that it can pay off. We did it through a different funding source than you'll probably pursue. We did it through the State Water Resources Control Board Energy Efficiency Grant. We got half of that in grant funding, and then half of that in low interest loans. To pay that, it was about a $4 million project for a half a megawatt in the 750,000 kilowatt hours battery storage. It will work. There are some things, pack power. I know the PG&E, we had fits with PG&E, was probably the most painful part of the whole project. I'm sure that you will have the same thing, the growing pains. Pack power is going to want to work with you, but they don't know what they don't know. So just be prepared for that. Don't be disillusioned by that. It's going to take time. If you think it's going to take a year, it's probably going to take 3. Not to scare you off, but that's just the reality of it. So I just would like you to be prepared for that. That's really about all I have for you. If you would like to ask me any questions, please feel free.
Any questions from the board? Nope. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry for that little interruption with the presentation. Any other public comments as to the issue?
I didn't come here for this. I came here for the gang thing. I don't think the electrical problem is the county's issue. Give the sheriffs more money. She's talking hospital, right? That's a private hospital. And they profited $60 million last year. Why is the taxpayers of Crescent Cedar, Del Norte County going to cover the cost of their generator? They're talking solar. I have solar. I have solar in my trailer. I have solar in my house. That doesn't always work in the cloudy weather, and we have a lot of cloudy weather. If you want to do something, do a proposal to build a couple diesel generators at the high school. That way the high school can run. At the couple of gas stations so the county can run them, tie them into your lines like you would your house. But there's people going to charge you money to do this program they want to do, and you guys don't have an engineer that can sit down, let's put a 100,000 diesel generator here, another 100,000 diesel generator there, that'll cover some real critical areas for the county. Because if a tsunami hits like last time, and when the last tsunami hit, it's all going to go shut down. Everything's shutting down. The school's shutting down, everything's shutting down. So my argument is, why are you spending money for these people to do a micro energy for you when you use your own engineer and say, okay, if we got a diesel generator and tapped it into here, they put solar panels on the harbor. How's that working out for the harbor? How's that working out for the harbor? It's not. What are they, millions of dollars in debt because of it, or the company that did it backed out? Just do your own engineer and build your own generators where you need them at in the critical areas when the power goes off, like the prison does. So have an engineer go flip that generator on. It'll run until it goes away. Like the gentleman here said, wherever he is, it was only down for 48 hours. I have my own generator at my house and my own panels, so I was fine. My neighbors came to my house to get water and everything when that went down. But I was fine. Not that I had to have someone else do it. It's not that hard. Even if a city They can still tie it into PG&E. So instead of paying someone else the tax money from this county to do something, just buy the county's own generators, diesel generators, and put them up. If he got generators, diesel generators and solar panels, why would you have solar panels if you have diesel generators? Why have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on the kilowatt batteries? You got a diesel generator. Look at the electric charging stations. Half of them are ran by diesel generators.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Janelle Cobalt, and I'm a member of the Del Norte Resilient Energy Committee. And we put on the wind event last spring, and we're currently planning on putting on a microgrid and grid resiliency panel at some point here in the future. And we're very excited about this whole proposal because a lot of people weren't okay during the Smith River Complex, including me, who was without power for quite a few days and quite distressed by it, including a lot of businesses in this town which lost a lot of money. Not to mention, there possibly will be more climate problems in the future because of the warming of our planet, which a lot of people, of course, are in denial of, which I am not. And I think this is very forward-thinking to embark on a project like this, and I would hope that the Board of Supervisors would maybe form an ad hoc committee so people in the community can be more involved in this process and know what's going on. We don't have to hear like some kind of vague rumor going on that there's going to be a solar presentation here today. And with that, I just want to commend the people who are bringing forth this idea and you guys for listening to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What's it?
If the public comments.
Any other public comment? Bring it back to the board.
I appreciate Greg's comments. One of the things that I would remind the board about and what drove a conversation when SiteLogic took us down to the Humboldt County Airport that installed a 2.5 megawatt microgrid on their facility that is run by the Redwood Energy Commission. It was the County Board of Supervisors that reminded the community that in 1964 they were cut off from the world, meaning the flood came along and cut every access point off from that community. Not dissimilar in Del Norte County in 1964, and I know you just moved here 8-9 years ago, but in 1964, this county was also cut off from the world, meaning diesel was not available to run the generators. As we're aware, Smith River Complex, we used 53,000 gallons plus of diesel a day to generate power for this community. So diesel is not necessarily the answer. We need to provide more site secure redundancy in order to power up our critical infrastructure to keep our essential services operating. It's not to say there's other ways to do this. It's just this could be the quickest solution for us to provide that security this community needs. And so in looking forward to the future, I would encourage us as a board to reflect back on history, the history that has cut this community off from those needs that would power diesel generators per se, and put something more site specific. The technology's there, our ability to generate the megawatt capacity we need for these essential services are there. I would encourage us to take steps to explore an option, whether it's with SiteLogic or some other team, but at least to provide that security that we need to provide for the essential services in case of disaster. Because in 1964, some of us here in this room were alive and can remember the events that took place on those days.
No, thank you. Any other comment? Thank you so much for the presentation. Appreciate your time.
Chair Wilson, if I may, and I would ask our county council, I'm not sure exactly what the next steps are based on the way this was agendized, but is there a process that would allow our direction from this board to allow staff to work on some mechanism to have this as a more broad-based approach with not just myself, but with either an AdCoc or staff direction at this time? What could we do here with the motion potentially to where this essentially conversation wouldn't die?
I mean, you can direct staff to bring it back if that's what the board wants to do, bring something else back. This was just agendized as a presentation to kind of educate everyone about what one option is.
Correct.
I do believe that we need to have something brought back to us, and I would like that to be at the next board meeting if possible, so that we can keep moving this conversation forward. I think this is important. I think it's short-sighted not to look at other options for the protection of our community. And so if that's what needs to happen, is it just direction? I would like for that to come back before the board for us to revisit it when it's agendized properly.
If you want to give direction as to what you want to see, I mean, would you like to look at forming an ad hoc? What type of direction are you looking for?
Well, it seems like they're very equipped to be able to provide us with real numbers and real plans. So I guess it need to be back to be agendized to hear what those numbers are, to see if we have a company in place. If we have to go out for an RFP, I don't know how that works. But I think this is an interesting topic. I think that we need to keep it on our front burner. So Supervisor Howard, how would you like to proceed with that?
I know the SiteLogic team presented us a form of a letter of agreement. I don't know what that letter of agreement would look like, but I think maybe providing direction to staff to potentially work on a letter of agreement that would allow the board to take a look at what that letter entails, and more importantly, discuss it at a future meeting. I think that would be appropriate.
If you just need consensus, I'm in agreement as well.
Yeah, I'm in favor.
Yeah, I'm okay with it coming back to discuss options.
I think we're all, yeah.
Okay, if by consensus, Chair, then unless you believe we need a motion.
No, I think just consensus to bring it back with a formal request for.
Yeah, I don't think we need a full form of motion. You guys aren't voting on anything.
Okay, thank you.
At this point in time, we have a 1040 item which has been delayed. I apologize to the sheriff and his crew. If you please, come forward. Sheriff Scott. And again, I apologize for the delay.
No problem at all. We've got a little PowerPoint that we put together and to kind of show this, but to start off, just to give you an idea, this began in an ad hoc meeting quite some time ago, and some ideas of how we could support the hourly rates going forward with negotiations coming up. It was my understanding that the county just didn't have the funding to really put forth what I felt like needed to be put forth for negotiations to get us where we needed to be. And so somewhat of a sacrifice on my part, Nancy and I put together a proposal, and we brought that to the ad hoc. I don't think there was any argument as to the setup for what we were looking at. We were just wanting to get through negotiations, and that ended. The negotiations outcome hasn't done anything for me, and the evolving competition out there has become really difficult to compete with, and I think everybody sees that. You guys all travel to Sacramento and these different places, RCRC, wherever it may be, and law enforcement is really in a bind right now. And so if we're not keeping up with what's happening and occurring, we end up with hiring issues. We can't find people, but we also can't retain people. So it's twofold. The issue is really twofold. And so as I go through this proposal, please ask questions, take a look at it. I know that we do have a comp study coming up, and I think that's wonderful. And I think even with this, we'll probably be low if we make that. But what I'm here to tell you is that the opportunity came up, and I think the opportunity came up because of all the phone calls from the constituents that we have, and the homeless problem that we have, and all the things that we're about to have to deal with. and I don't have the deputies to deal with it. So if I wait much longer, and you'll see how long it takes to hire a deputy. If I wait 6 months, then I'm projecting a year and a half. Before boots are on the ground. So that's why I feel like we're in a hurry here. I feel like I need your help as a board to really take a look at this and really give it some thought, because it's one of those things that we can hold off, but the longer we hold off to do something, the more the consequences are falling upon us. So the first one, I don't know how to change it. So this isn't very long, but the deputies or recruit deputies, when they apply for us, they go through HR. HR puts out a NeoGov alert. People see it, they apply for it. The application process takes a little bit of time before you can gather up a bunch of names and different people to interview and so forth. That can take around a month or so. Once you get them rounded up and find a date where you can get everyone together to take a written exam, you're probably another month down the road. And then after the written exam, then you have some candidates that you want to send on to an oral interview, and that's, I would say, roughly 2 to 3 weeks to get that going, because you've got to schedule that. You can't just call these people in the next day and start interviewing. So once you do the oral interviews, then you've got to compile those and go into a conditional offer mode, and that takes a little bit of time. And then when you get to background check, we do California post-certified background check. So that includes your psychological, your medical. It's about a 40-hour background. And what I mean by that is the investigator spends about 40 hours on that background. I've just talked to 3 or 4 different firms that do them, and that's how they charge. It's typically 40 hours, especially nowadays with all the changes in law. A lot of folks do get washed out in the background process because they just can't pass that. Some folks pass out or pass up on the psychological. It may be immature, it may be all kinds of different issues. So they're very thorough, and then of course the medical. Now, if we use salary savings and we send somebody to a police academy, now we're looking at 6 months. So we put those cadets through an academy. They go through, they get done 6 months down the road. Once they graduate that academy, if they do, well, the last academy we had 2 that graduated and we lost 1. Then they move into a field training program, and that's another 14 weeks. So as you can see, in my dilemma, by holding off on these salary issues that I see, it takes so long that projecting boots on the ground is really difficult. And then by the time you send 3 or 4 people through this process, how many do we lose? So I feel like we're all on the same page there. It's just how do we get there? I really do. And everybody wants to see the public safe. So this is the sheriff communications. This would be the operations side budget. Here's some scans that we did to look at some comparison counties. You've got Del Norte up here in the top. Deputy 1 at step A is $26.61 an hour. The patrol sergeant is $34.82. You can kind of scan through that pretty quick. Humboldt, $28.19. Starting, and a patrol sergeant at $35.99. Humboldt, I just talked to Billy Hansel yesterday. He said that starting wage is very accurate, but they have very, very large incentives that makes that a much higher amount. And we could look into that as well in the future, and I think we'll have to. Top step deputy for Humboldt County is over $40 an hour, deputy sheriff. Mendocino, $40 an hour starting. Siskiyou, $28.64. Now they have a huge higher sign-on bonus and a lot of different things, and they are in negotiations currently. Tehama, Their starting is 3343, Glenn 3294. So, I mean, we can look at these different salary comparisons all day long, but those are just a few that I was able to pull up. Here's kind of in a different format. There's your deputy sheriff step A's for different counties, from Glenn County on down, and your patrol sergeants on down. You can see Del Norte's 2661. And next would be probably Siskiyou and Humboldt. And this is somewhat of a staffing chart to look at. This will show the vacancies currently with what we have. You can see that the second line, or fourth line down here, fifth line, you've got right in here, this deputy is one that we sent to the academy and graduated, and he's on the FTO program that I just mentioned in the first slide. The second one, Garcia, we hired him out of the jail, and he's currently in the academy. He was the only one that passed all of our background and process. And Gallagher, he's on patrol. And this last one over here is our boating safety position, which is funded by Boating and Waterways. And these vacant positions across the board here are all open, and that's actually missing one. There is one more vacancy. We currently have one dispatcher vacancy. These are the current salary ranges. You kind of glance at those real quickly. Starting, you got the 36 through a 42. And I can always switch back to these if you guys need to, but. And these are the proposed reclassification that we talked about in the ad hoc. This is just a little bit more streamlined, but it is the same. The proposal would be to freeze 3 of these deputy positions currently. And this idea that I came up with is something another sheriff's office already has done. So Lake County has already done this, very successful. I just talked to them last week. I think they're 1 or 2 deputies down, and they're almost full staff. And they're now looking at unfreezing a few of their positions that they had to freeze to make this happen. So it is something that has been done before. These are the proposed salary ranges. You can tell here where I gave the last example that instead of starting at the 38, you'd start at a 40, you'd top at a 50. There'll probably be some compaction conversations. I don't necessarily agree with that whatsoever, but so be it. These are what we have here. Here is the current salary ranges and the proposed reclass salary ranges. You have payroll at the top, at current, and then to the right of that is what proposed salary range would be, and on down. Overtime is very similar. The part-time funding, the overtime holiday, the PERS unfunded. You've got retirement, EMP benefits, and so forth. So you can see that it's not a whole lot of a change there. You're going to save about $38,452.25. And if you eliminate and not freeze, you'll save about $115,542. Now, based on the reclass, this is where you'd end up. And this would include the 4% that's upcoming. I'm sure that'll be discussed as well, but that COLA, I think, is coming up in January. So that will help out a lot with this. I think it'll get us in a lot better shape if we can do this. So it would put your starting deputy at a $30.81 amount. Hopefully that makes sense. Can always go back. This is the jail budget. Jail and courts, sorry. Here's your Del Norte Correctional Deputy 1, starting at 2272 at a step A. Correctional Sergeant at 2229. Humboldt's 2309 starting currently. Like I said, they have major incentives there. The sheriff just mentioned that. It was important to note that. Mendocino 27, Glenn County 2466, Tehama 2743, and Siskiyou, which is in negotiations currently, is my understanding. And this is a comparison based on a current salary schedule with other counties. You can see we're quite low. Here's the jail division currently and the vacancies. As you can see there, we have quite a few, and we definitely are working on that. We've hired a few, and we've had to let go of a few. And then these are the current salary ranges, starting at for correctional deputy at a 31, topping out at a 39, and on and so forth. And the freezing of 2 correctional deputies and 1 correctional tech for the jail division would get us where we need to be. As you can see, there's still plenty of staff there to deal with the day-to-day operations. And these are the proposed ranges. So it would then go to from a 35 to a 43 for a correctional deputy. And here's your proposed reclass for the jail side. You can see the bottom number there. There's really not much of a difference. There's your increase. And then this is your reclass salary schedule. That'll push the Del Norte County deputies or correctional deputies up to 2504, which would make a big difference. And I brought Nancy to ask any technical questions. Step right up.
Any questions on the board?
Yeah, tons. Don't know exactly where to begin, but yeah, thank you for the presentation, Sheriff. It's extremely helpful to understand before we get our comp analysis back and comparison studies with other counties next year, how this might look based on your proposal. It was my understanding that originally, I'm not sure if this was the same proposal that you brought to the ad hoc committee and the budget team last February, March. They're in that vicinity, but at some point, there must have been some agreement to bring what we currently have in front of us in our draft budget, that you're basically saying, hey, slow the row, I can't make this work as proposed and agreed to in March. What's happened since that time that essentially you're asking for with the board to say, hey, we need to do something different than what I agreed to back in March?
Well, I think that's twofold. My agreement was to wait until salary negotiations was over with, not for a comp study. And what I'm seeing, and I'm glad you brought it up, is the loss of staff and the continued difficulty to hire, and down the road, how long it's going to take us to get boots on the ground, and the needs of the public, the safety of the public, the inability to respond to major incidents, the crime rate going up, the homeless problems that we have, out in front of us. I can't offer much help to move them along. And so these kind of things become, in my opinion, dire. And the amount of phone calls that I get, and I get from you guys too. You know, you've got constituents that want help and they don't feel safe. And when they don't feel safe, it becomes an emergency. And I don't mean that we're going to, fix this and be able to respond to everything in the whole world. But for emergency situations, when I've got 2 deputies on or 1, which is quite often, how do we get to these major incidents? And then we have a jail, which is our constitutional obligation to operate. And we have civil procedures, or a civil office, the civil service of restraining orders and civil papers. And we have court bailiffs, which I do not have one currently. That is completely vacant, and that is a constitutional mandate. And so all of these things, with jail staff getting smaller and smaller and dwindling down and then kind of picking back up a little bit, then you have to drop your inmate population. And then we're letting people out that shouldn't be let out, in my opinion. And so that's really what brought this on. And I think, this is one of those situations where we have to take a look, see what you think. I think we need to do something. I really do. And I think it needs to be now, because I think if we don't do something, we're pushing this down the road too far. And so that's
The chair, if I may. The freezing versus elimination, obviously your structure, as you've shown it here, the freezing or potentially even elimination of those positions, I don't know how the staffing structure was originally formed and essentially what allows for that number of people. I'm assuming somebody's come along and said, well, it takes this number of people to man the jail and this number of people to adequately patrol the county. Do you feel freezing those positions, or at least potentially even eliminating those positions, is going to provide for less for the county, or is it just going to provide a more efficient operating system for you, which wasn't well thought out in previous administrations?
what it's going to do is it's going to put boots on the ground in those vacant positions that weren't X'd, which is going to be more staff than we've seen in years. So if that helps answer the question, at least it makes us operable where we are not operating currently. Hopefully that answers that.
I'm simply asking the question whether we freeze or eliminate positions. Does that now provide a future shortfall for you? I mean, are you going to ask the board in the near future to bring those positions back to meet the needs of this community for public safety?
I think that would be the idea, is to be able to bring those back, because we don't have a drug task force anymore. We don't have or an investigations unit that's doing those things, and we have a lot to look at down the road. So, I mean, in a perfect world, which is in your ballpark, do you want to not do this and use Measure R funds or something like that? It's my opinion. I think there's money to do this without freezing, but this is my offer because I see it as that important.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. We've frozen positions that were vacant years ago after 2008, 2009 crash. And the difference between freezing and elimination is elimination, they're gone. The likelihood of you bringing them back is very limited, especially if you're doing what was recommended, which is to roll the cost savings of those 3 eliminated positions into regular salaries, because then it just gets absorbed, and bringing those back may be cost prohibitive altogether. Freezing, you don't have the overall cost savings because you're still obligated to pay workman's comp and the other for the position, even if it's not gone. But because it's frozen, there is no hindrance in bringing those positions back once the climate has changed, and your cost savings is less, but your potential of unfreezing positions is still more viable.
Chair, if I could. My question, Sheriff Scott, is when is the last time, not in your tenure, I'm sure, that you've had all those positions filled? I mean, currently it looked like there was 9 vacant deputy positions. Has that, if we freeze 3 And now we have 6 that we potentially can fill if we are able to compensate appropriately. When's the last time that all those 10 had been filled? I mean, I feel like we're not solving anything by just allowing us to stay status quo, because we haven't even been able to fill them in so long. So freezing 3, if I don't know if I'm making any sense, but freezing 3 still seems like a gain for us because potentially we can fill 6.
Yeah, no, that is accurate, and the decline appears to have started around 2014, which kind of matches up with the climate of who was going to the academies and the shortfalls of people not wanting to get into the profession, and it becoming more, for lack of better words, more of a career that had more rules to it. It's not, you can't hire someone off the street and just send them anymore. I mean, by next year, 2026, there's probably going to be an associate's degree or better required just to hire someone off the street and send them to an academy. So as you can see, the evolving changes, and then of course, there's a lot of things that have created that. But back to 2014 was what is on paper as far as kind of the fall of being full staffed, and I think that it relates to the loss of a lot of grants also with the marijuana funding and things like that. So there's a lot of reasons for it. But anyhow, hopefully that answers your question.
That does. And what I want to say is that this has been presented before to the ad hoc committee, so I'm no stranger to this. What I appreciate about this proposal is the out-of-box thinking, because he's not coming with his hand out saying he wants more. He's saying, hey, this will be a zero exchange here. In fact, I'll save you $115,000 on the patrol side. It's going to cost you $3,500, it looks like, on the jail side. But I mean, when we appointed Sheriff Scott, some of you weren't on the board, but in May of 2022, this board sat here and said, we will do whatever we can to support you. We will do what we need to do and within our power. I believe the time is now. He's brought us forward a presentation. He's saying, here's what I want to do. This isn't costing the county any additional money. What it's doing is ensuring that he can do his job as a sheriff to protect this county. And I think the time is now, and I think that this isn't an outrageous ask. Like he said, we could go and tap Measure R, and we can use all that additional funding for Measure R. But this is an option. He's saying, I'm going to give up something to get something. And I think that we need to do this.
Go ahead. So I kind of caught you off guard at the last meeting and asked you about the hiring. And so I'm just curious, several months back we allowed, or we agreed, hey, hire whoever you can find coming in as a deputy at a step C, which would put him at the 2907, which is roughly close to what your ask is. What's going to be different did that bring any new hires in compared to if we make it just at 30 instead of 2910? Is it what's gonna entice more people? Are people saying, hey, $1 more and I'm coming there? Or like, what is that gonna be the answer? Or did you see any results with the type C? Or just give me an explanation why that didn't work or possibly could work.
The best way to put it with step C is if you owned a Ford dealership and you paid a guy $30 in commission to go out there and work, and he was at a step C, but you had a kid you really liked down the road that worked at Napa Auto Parts, and you made a deal, hey, come work for me, I'll give you $35 an hour. I'll put you at step C. As soon as those two guys start working together and they find out, or this guy that's finds out that this kid is making more money, he's going to be pissed and he's going to quit, right? I mean, that goes with anything. So maybe that's not the greatest analogy, but if I hire somebody right out of the academy at a step C and I have 16 Bs that have worked at my office for 2 years, what kind of morale effect do you have there? So I don't use it. I will not use it because it's not effective. But laterals you know, if you want to hire a lateral, it is an awesome tool, but we're not getting laterals. We're getting a few. Does that make sense?
Sort of. So there's 16 deputies currently out of Step B, or, I mean, I know the correctional officer are different, but this was mainly to bring in deputies, right? Is that still the same numbers and same conflict?
Yeah, it's
And-
similar.
So then, given that tool, maybe you just didn't advertise it or not because of your reasoning. But was there more interest in people wanting to come at that rate, or do you think there would be? And then with this new plan, I guess it's just bumping everybody up, so then it's more allowed to hire those new people? Is that kind of what you're after?
Well, this would reclassify the steps. So if we did this and say it's a starting correctional officer at whatever it was, 20-something an hour, 24, as opposed to what it was before, 21, or a starting deputy, we're going to move that from 26.61 an hour to $30 an hour. That's going to help you hire. That's going to help you get them in the door. And then the other steps, the reclassification of those steps up, the 5-year deputy or the 3-year deputy or even the 10-year deputy, we're moving up with those steps, so they're getting paid more. And the idea is retention, so it hits both ends.
Just,
A little bit of clarification
Okay,
is
go ahead.
the deputy recruit at step C is 2661, not 29.
Yeah, it's a deputy recruit to get in the
sheriff, after he's completed the academy and FTO and becomes a deputy sheriff 1, that step C is 29. But we're trying to get the recruits in and start them at step C. That is step C for a deputy recruit is 2661.
So that, sorry, just as I guess a point of reference, when this, between April and now when this came forward, it also became about retention. So when we did the first round in April, between that one and the final round, just in the corrections department, there were 5 vacancies that were not there in April that were there in the second round. So I think partially this also holds a large point in the retention of people, whether they came in at a C or an A.
Any other questions?
No questions, just.
Any comments from the public?
I was going to make one
Okay, go
more
ahead.
point, and it's a point that we discussed during this last board meeting, because I don't want the community to believe that we really haven't gone out and really tried to support the efforts of the sheriff's department to not only recruit but retain. We have increased wages at the sheriff's department by 30% since 2020, but it really hasn't resulted in what at least you are now seeing a sheriff in those game-changing moments that's going to allow you to put the boots on the ground. We do have the 4%, as mentioned, coming up. I guess my larger concern is if the board were to consider an action like this today, the mechanisms, potentially the roadblocks that are in place for the board to take an action, does this have to go through negotiations with SEA before the board could even consider things like this? Or is it just, or do you believe at this point in time, if we were to look at a reclass and a freeze of positions, how do you see that working? Because right now, for me personally, I don't know how that mechanisms work without having compaction issues with your upper management, and then in addition with the negotiations and structures that we have in place with SEA. So I'm sure you've thought through some of this, because right now I don't see how that mechanism works.
So my understanding is the reclass portion is just a matter of them looking at, you know, each job description and saying, yes, that's fine with us. And then whether they're fine with any burden that the freezing of those positions could put upon the rest of the staff. And so kind of looks to me like we've got a lot of support from our union. So I'm not too worried about that, but they can speak to that. But I think this plan is a good plan. Lake County did this, and it was successful. They're almost full staff, and they're looking at unfreezing their positions. So, you know, and over the years, obviously, there's been contributions, and the board has looked at this many times. There's, you know, things that I maybe legally can't be consulted on, but I think there are things that it's a detriment to negotiations, and those are 3-year contracts. I think it's a horrible idea, but that's just my opinion. Because you can't keep up with the evolution of what's taking place. You can't, because it's just evolving so fast. So you guys as board members sit in a room and you say, we're going to throw a lot of money at this. And by year 2, you're going, holy smokes, we're already behind again. So anyway, hopefully that answers that.
Thank you, Sheriff.
I just wanted to pitch in there that also Jack Garamendi from Calaveras County said they did basically the same thing. Significantly raised wages, and they are fully staffed right now. They're about 36% higher than Delaware County currently. Darren McDaniel from Merced says they have raised wages, and they're not fully staffed, but they're not seeing the people leave like they used to. And Supervisor Bradford from Yuba County also said that they raised wages and are fully staffed as well, and they are 31% higher than we are now. So, I mean, that's a long 30% higher is a long way out there. I just wanted to illustrate the point that there are other counties out there that are doing this, and they're finding successes. So I don't see a downside. I agree with them, the concerns about the mechanism, how that part of it works, where it's concerned with the freezing versus the elimination and the union piece. But again, I see some heads shaking like we got no problem with this kind of thing there in the audience. So to me, this seems easy. As Supervisor Starkey said, we told the sheriff that we were going to have his back, support him any way we could. We have done that with pretty significant raises that Supervisor Howard has talked about, but we can see now that is not near enough, and the sheriff has found a way to do it again and you know, do our best to get police officers in the ranks and get us staffed up to where we can have a better law enforcement community serving us. So I'm hoping that we can get this done.
Any public comment?
I have one more question before you go.
Sorry.
Sorry, Sam. Has this been run up through the proper procedures and, you know, been blessed by the CFO and the CAO and made sure we're not missing anything? Have all the checks and balances been done and approved? I know we're not approving anything today, I don't believe, but have this steps already happened?
We have met with the CAO and the county auditor on this, and the CAO has a few concerns about compaction, but then he can explain that to you if he wants to. But yeah, it has been introduced to them, and I think we're actually fairly close on agreements with it. There's just a few little parts that we don't necessarily come together with, but that's fair enough.
Okay.
We'll also rerun the numbers that are in here are mine. And so obviously they need to be vetted to be sure that I haven't missed something. So he will need to just evaluate to be sure.
Perfect.
Did you were thrown in the mix? So
if you want me to speak to that, yeah. The sheriff's correct. We have met in our plan. You know, I've been developing a plan since the ad hoc committee as well, because I knew this was coming back to us at some point. And so our plans are not drastically different. I don't agree 100% with his numbers. Compaction by definition is going to happen in this structure with these changes. There's no way around it. Whether the sheriff agrees with it or not, it is going to happen. So it's like I said, we're very close. We're not that far apart from our plans that we've developed separately, actually. And we did already agree that anything that came forward or direction from the board would be vetted by the CFO, who's the official, you know, finance person of of the county as far as seeing what this pays for by eliminating or freezing these positions. The main decision made by the board needs to be, do we eliminate them? Do we freeze them? And at what point do you look at, refilling them if the sheriff comes back with a different proposal for different units in his division? So the initial plan that I had seen was eliminating these positions to fund these changes. I'm not on either side of that fence, to tell you the truth. It really is up to the board. Freezing them does make it where you still have to pay for your health insurance and stuff like that for those positions. So it's not a total cost savings. But again, that falls to the board.
I would welcome it, a motion from one of the board to direct staff to take these requests, recommendations, work them back through the CFO's office as well, and bring back to the board a recommendation.
So moved.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second? Public comment, please.
I think the sheriff's being incredibly diplomatic and incredibly reserved as to what his needs are. I fail to understand how fewer people at the sheriff's office is going to provide more comprehensive service to the county. I just can't wrap my mind around that. The idea that you will not pay the sheriff's deputies what they by rights deserve is beyond comprehension to me. I understand the constraints that Supervisor Howard offered. I just can't understand why you don't understand that lack of response time for emergency services in the county is not something that just happened in the last couple of years. It's been a decade or multiple decades old problems. I mean, where I've lived for 25 years. The sheriff's department cannot promise a 911 call service in under 45 minutes. In most cases, it's an hour or more. We're talking about a staff that has to deal with a county the size of Rhode Island, with, when fully staffed, is 24 patrol deputies. And at most, the sheriff can offer what, 1, 2 deputies for the entire county? And you can't even pay those deputies a commiserate rate to the value that they provide to the county in terms of safety and security. I mean, you can provide animal control with all kinds of money, but you can't give the sheriff money. You can give, you can build a whole new department for economic development, but you can't give the sheriff money. You can talk about reclassifying people in health and human services. You can give an assistant to the director of community development, but you can't give the sheriff money to be able to hire and retain people in his department. I mean, for crying out loud, he's got, what, 14 deputies now, of which only a few have more than 2 years of experience. What does that say for the 5 of you? What does that say for the 5 of you? Are you listening? Are you the portraits on the wall behind the kiosk that you currently occupy? I mean, it's astounding that you don't understand what's at stake here. My neighbor had a vagrant waving an axe under her nose. Had that turned serious, the sheriff's deputy that appeared would have been 59 minutes and 59 seconds too late. And we as a county will protect animals before we'll protect human beings to the extent that's necessary. I mean, we're not talking about, taking graffiti off the wall. We're talking about serious life and death situations that the sheriff confronts on a daily basis. And yet we're unwilling to give the kind of tools necessary for him to do his job. I find that absolutely astounding. absolutely derelict on the part of all 5 of you that you will not provide him with the tools necessary for him to have a fully functioning sheriff's department, which, by the way, is the most vital component of government service, protecting and securing its citizens as a whole, not just a few, as a whole. Thank you.
Sam, I just want to say I've been speaking that language for 2 years now. So as much as you want to throw me into this, I've been pounding this drum.
I didn't know the sheriff's department made that little bit of money. $22 an hour. Working at McDonald's pays you $20. Starting pay. These people sacrifice their lives for you guys, for your citizens. They're making $22 an hour. I had no idea that that's how these counties paid their law enforcement. The sheriff. I talked about Mexican mafia members fighting against Northern Structure members in our own city, in our own county, and he don't even have a gangs unit. How can you identify who they are and actually track these people down before they start killing your children, our children, their grandchildren? Is money the issue that we're willing to sacrifice these young lives for the gang shootings we're going to have, like Chicago and Detroit and all these other cities have? If he can't have the resources to track these people down, this isn't graffiti, this is mafia. It's not graffiti, it's Mexican mafia. And you guys are sitting here like, oh, a couple of you are on board, a couple of you aren't. Proposition R, right? Is it the Proposition R? Is that the one for the money? There's what, $4 million in it? I remember voting for that. I thought that was law enforcement and firefighter money. What money, what's it, $4 million sitting in the bank? Throw it in a high interest account in one of the credit unions, take the interest and pay the sheriffs more money. If you can do that, instead of just sitting there, if it's supposed to be designed for them, let it be for them. I mean, I did law enforcement for 23 years. I've been put in the hospital 4 times doing my job. These people, for $30,000 a year, they can't even buy a house in the county they live in. They can barely rent an apartment. And you guys are sitting here arguing over this little bit of money. Not all of you. Some of you are on board with it. I know a couple of you are on board with it. But the ones that aren't on board with it, how do you justify that? Let's say the Mexican mafia north of Tamil getting a shooting war at the Patriot gas station and kill one of those kids at that academy right there on the corner. Is that worth this money that you're trying to cut? He's willing to freeze staff instead of cutting staff. I understand that. I realize all that goes on. But I agree he shouldn't have to. Before you hire a solar company, before you hire any of these outside agencies to come and tell you how to do what needs to be done to help the county, they should have the money to fund the county to make sure, like this gentleman said, your whole job is to protect us. That's what you're voting in for. You're voting in to protect us, District 1 through District 5. I live in District 4. That's your whole job. You have no other job but to protect the citizens of this county first and foremost. The solar energy comes later. This comes later. This comes later. The number one thing is safety and security. Fire department and safety and security. That should be the number one goal. Not they can't buy a freaking house. It's ridiculous.
Any other public comment?
I don't have water, so my throat's a little. Hi, I'm Alicia Williams. This is my first time attending a meeting, and I'm very happy that the sheriff is being discussed because I'm very concerned about the short staffing issues and all the other concerns with law enforcement. So I know I don't have a lot of time, so what I want to say is that if you want to direct solutions to long-term results, we have to target root causes. Now, the sheriff, I know they're understaffed. I understand there's a lot of political stuff that has to do with that. However, it is just one concern that is impacting staffing. The other concerns that I feel need to be addressed are the culture surrounding like supporting the staff, which can impact their attracting them, recruitment, retention, all those things. So the culture of support needs to be for the staff that is hired on. and the existing staff, that is one of respect, responsiveness toward them and involving whatever the staff is experiencing. I have attempted to reach out to them. They are so overburdened that when you offer help, they can't even get back to you. So I'm here. And then another thing is recruitment must be effective. You need to target possible, future enforcers, protectors, and guide them into these positions early. Now, I suggest doing fast track programs developed with partnership with you guys, with the sheriff, with the high school, with the local college. Okay, fast track programs, get them interested early. Another thing tied into that is the fourth point, which is addressing the loss of honor in the law enforcement field. This is across our country. And some people might want to be in denial over that, but if you face facts in this community, speaking of this community specifically, there is a loss of trust in law enforcement. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that respect from the powers that be isn't always given to those that they interface with. And it's a very complicated situation. However, whenever you have a power dynamic and there's respect, mutual respect supposed to be there, the leader has to be the one to give the respect. So I know from firsthand experience that I was greatly disrespected when I interfaced with the sheriff. And it was really, really hurtful because I'm trying to give them support. So with that said, it ties into culture very deeply. I want to address, because I do not want to pile on to the sheriff. I do not want to pile on to our leaders. I'm here to support. My goal is I'm an activist. A big part of that is advocacy. I need to open up lines of communication. When I tried to do that with the sheriff, I got completely shut down in a very harsh way. And again, I understand what they're going through. This is the way I put it. You're over here struggling, you have a lot on your back, and all anybody ever does is throw more on you. That's the sheriff. Okay, we need to help the sheriff. Let's see, I have a suggestion here. I'm gonna go over it just for a minute, you guys. So my suggestion is, we have a huge untapped resource here in our local community. We have a lot of people that have prosperity in our local community. They want safety too. They love the sheriff too. Let us give them a way to support the sheriff while they're struggling until they find their footing again. How do we do that? We have to open up lines of communication. We have to collaborate. We have to find people that want solutions. We have to discuss possibilities, and we have to align perspectives so that we can get a cohesive strategy, which again targets root causes so we can have long-term success regarding staffing.
Thank you. We gotta go.
Oh, and I would like, if anybody's interested in this kind of thing, actually collaborating, please reach out to me so we can exchange numbers.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. We had a motion. Can you pull the vote?
Supervisor Borges.
Yes.
Supervisor Howard.
Yes.
Supervisor Short.
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey.
Yes.
Chair Wilson.
Yes. We're going to take a break, 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and resume with the agenda. Yeah, must have. And what we're doing is, as we are moving to the consent agenda, so comments from members of the public may be heard at this time regarding matters on the consent agenda only. Is there any public comment? Oh, I'm shocked.
Well, I see you've gotten the consent agenda down to 2/3 of the county's business, 18 items in this particular session, and of which scheduled items consist of the public comment, the sheriff's report, and a presentation on community resiliency from natural disasters. The regular items consist of a district attorney's grant implementation and a review of the penal section findings of the grand jury report, and finally a letter and a review of, or no, you're going to conclude the 14-day budget hearing. It's amazing that the recent meeting that I attended to, where the consent agenda consisted of one item, and that was the minutes of the previous meeting. That board actually conducted its business in a transparent fashion in front of the public. The unfortunate part about it is it revealed the incompetency and the general train wreck that board exists in, perhaps has existed in for years. I'm wondering if the same thing can be applied to the Board of Supervisors, because they most certainly do not spend much time in front of the public talking about the 17 or so additional items on the consent agenda that very often merit some discussion, some transparency, and certainly some public input. I'm appalled that this Board of Supervisors continue to conduct business of the county's employees rather than those that are elected to represent not just a few people here, a few people there, and a few people over here, but the entire public, the entire 26,000, 66 of us, which I believe is the current population being advertised. I think that the consent agenda is a travesty and will continue to be, and it's something that this board needs to address, as well as the Sheriff's Department's difficulties.
Thank you. Any other public comment as to the consent agenda? Seeing none, bring it to the board.
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second. Please pull the vote.
Supervisor Short.
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey.
Yes.
Supervisor Borges.
Yes.
Supervisor Howard.
Yes.
Chair Wilson.
Yes. Brings us to general government. Number 22, authorize the district attorney to end their designee to implement the Victim Witness Assistance Program and approve the grant subawards for years October 1st, 2024 to 2025, October 1st, 2025 to 2026, October 2026 to September 2027, including the amendments hereto subject to further review and approval and comply with the rules and regulations of Cal OES as requested by the district attorney. Is there anyone to speak to that? No. Then I will entertain public comment. Seeing none, bring it back to the board for a motion.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Please poll vote.
Supervisor Short.
Yes.
Supervisor Howard.
Yes.
Supervisor Borges.
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey.
Yes.
Chair Wilson.
Yes. And all I can say is the Victim Witness Assistance Program has been in effect for decades and decades, and it does a good job, especially when you have key personnel in that role that reach out and make sure that the victims are contacted and that they are provided with the assistance that they need and support that they need while they're going through this process. And now we come to 23. Review and discuss in accordance to the Penal Code Section 933, the findings and recommendation within the 23-24 final grand jury report requiring response from the governing body, approval the response with any board directions, revisions as directed by the final document assigned by the chair and forwarded by the proceeding judge to the Superior Court. Do we have any comments? Changes, recommendations? Bring it to the public. Any public comment as to grand jury response? Seeing none? Bring it back for a motion. Move to approve.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second? Guess it was me. The words came out of my mouth, I guess, you know, so. Anyway, poll the vote, please.
Supervisor Starkey,
Yes.
Supervisor Howard,
Yes.
Supervisor Borges, Supervisor Short,
Yes.
Chair Wilson.
Yes. Legislative and budget issues, consider miscellaneous legislative and budget matters pertinent to the county of Del Norte, authorize the chair to sign and send appropriate letters in respect to matters pending for the state and the federal government. Yes. We have number 24 was receive a copy of a letter approved to the state legislators from the Director of Health and Human Services per section 1.60 of the Administrative Manual as requested by the Director of Health and Human Services. What's that? Any public comment as to this issue? Seeing none? Thank you. Appreciate it. Board has received the letter. Number 25, this is to conclude the 14-day public hearing of the 24-25 fiscal year budget. Adopt Resolution 2024-033, the resolution adopting the 24-25 fiscal year general county and special budgets for Del Norte County, as well as setting appropriate limits for the 24-25 fiscal year. And 2, adopt Resolution 2024-032, resolution fixing tax rates for the 2024-25 fiscal year. And 3, approve Attachment A as presented for review on the September 10th, 2024, establishing 5 general fund positions, reclassifying 11 general fund positions, and adjusting the salary range for 1 general fund position. Authorize the Human Services to revise the county staffing chart to complete other administrative tasks necessary. And 4, approve Measure R funding for the Animal Services revision of the 24-25 Measure R budget, and is recommended by the Measure R Oversight Advisory Committee and as requested and presented to the County Administrative Officer and Auditor Controller. Any comments by the board?
I'm going to hold my comments till after public comment.
Okay. Public comment?
I see Health and Human Services well taken care of as usual. 60% of the county's budget, a vast majority of their employees, and yet dysfunctional and somewhat less than great decision-making individuals continue to proliferate in this county. Makes you wonder how effective Health and Human Services is as a department. But they get, 11 new general fund positions, reclassification of 11 general fund positions, and adjusted salary ranges for one of them. Yet you can't seem to find it within yourselves to do something about the problem at the Sheriff's Department. And finally, it seems like the Measure R Oversight and Advisory Committee must meet on Mars, because they certainly don't reflect the vital needs of the county. Somewhat disingenuous when parking lots and ballpark fencing and planners and building inspectors, grant writers seem to find their way to attract Measure R funding. The animal control portion of the Sheriff's Department seems to have no problem getting funding, but yet we don't have sufficient patrol deputies in the county to patrol an area the size of Grand Central Park, let alone the county of Del Norte. Another budget session that completely ignores the importance of certain things in the department, yet we can develop a whole new department for economic development. And I see at least in staff reports that we're realizing that government is the problem when it comes to economic development, and the direction should be pointed at the state if there is any improvement with regards to economic development to reduce the level of regulation, tax burden, and a whole variety of other things that government encumbers economic development with. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board.
So this is kind of piggybacking off the last discussion we had specific to the sheriff and trying to fully understand the impacts to the general fund. The sheriff has essentially proposed something that would keep at least, and obviously this has to go back through the ad hoc, but would at least keep the general fund budget neutral. That's yet to be potentially determined. The ad hoc that consists of the CAO and county auditor controller and other staff would have to really determine if that's true. If it weren't true and we still needed to make movements towards impacting the general fund, I guess I want to try to fully understand some of the concerns that were brought forward during the board report, especially as it relates to the over $7 million of general fund revenue that is essentially sitting out there but unallocated. That has really been realized as we made various points on it the last meeting through salary savings, right? So there's essentially $4.5 million plus in salary savings that we realize annually because we have unfilled positions at the sheriff's department and other general fund positions that are currently unfilled. If those positions were filled, I think the point was made last time that potentially we would be in the red. We wouldn't be in the black. That is of concern, I guess. And I want our decision-making process as a board to be fully, as I hear this word battered around during our meetings all the time, transparent. That when we make these decisions, we make them in a way that the public knows the decisions that we're making could potentially put us in the red if all our positions were full. But there's also additional dollars that were unrealized revenue, bringing us up to the close to $7.5 million that I'm happy to see Clinton has scraped together from somewhere that we potentially would allocate through this budget to capital improvement, potentially some vehicles that would have an asset. But I'm just trying to understand from you, Neil, I mean, truly, when we're considering this budget, and if we do have some success filling positions down the road, am I understanding this correctly? If we were to fill those positions, what's that? Let's say all those positions were full now. What's that do to us from a balanced budget standpoint?
I think you hit the nail on the head. You're correct that our current expenditures exceed our current revenues in the general fund. So if we were 100% fully staffed, then the general fund would be out close to $4 million. That has not happened in my career in the 25 years that I've been here. We always have vacancy rates to a certain percentage or certain extent. None like we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years. They've been significant, and I think that's statewide, as I've said many times. But yes, looking at the actual general fund budget without rollover carry forward from the fund balance of fiscal year 23-24, there is a deficit in the general fund budget.
So then so if we were budgeting fairly conservatively, we wouldn't be playing potentially with that $4.5 million. We'd just be looking at potentially this $2.5 million to allocate in our budget, because we'd want to see those positions filled within this current fiscal year. Is that correct?
Well, the 2.5 million is part of the fund balance also. The fund balance was close to $7 million. Much of that was needed to make the balance budget for the general fund at $45 million. And then we had the additional 2.5 that was unallocated that the board has decided to increase the contributions for capital improvement projects, the amount of the general fund reserve, and a number of other things that are included in the board report to actually present a balanced budget. You have to budget to your resources. Those are our available resources right now in the general fund.
But that 2+ million isn't being realized from salary savings. It's from other resources that essentially vary depending on tax structure and things annually.
The fund balance consists of many things. Most of all, it's salary savings. I think our salary savings for last fiscal year was $2.7 million. So the 4.3 on top of that is additional revenue that wasn't expected or expenditures that didn't happen during the year. We budgeted for a lot of capital improvements that didn't happen during the fiscal year due to a number of factors. Things take forever these days in order to get something going. Either to purchase a car takes 6 months, 8 months. So lots of times we'll budget for things that don't happen during the year.
Yep. So I appreciate those pieces that were offered up here. I'm going to continue advocating for our unfunded liability with this board. I think the sooner that we start addressing this unfunded liability, which I'm thankfully that you very clearly spelled it out in this board report, what we're faced with CalPERS, not only on the OPEB piece, but also on the retirement side, it's significant. And I would love to be using these one-time bubbles from salary savings and other things to be really pushing towards that unfunded liability, because we're paying interest on that unfunded liability if CalPERS doesn't make their nut. And that drives me nuts. We keep seeing those costs increase in our balance sheet every year, and that's a concern to me. So I need that fully out on the table as we make these decisions today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments from the board?
Well, I just want to clarify too. We currently only have revenues of 38 million, but because of the fund balance and because of everything, we have a $7.5 million fund balance. You're saying that 2.7 was salary savings. So I guess what I'm trying to understand, and which I may never understand, is why do we budget more than our revenue?
When the board is allocated a certain staffing level, we budget to full staff, whether they're full or not. And so a big part of the budget being over our revenues is the staffing level that the board has approved at each of our departments. We could cut staff or even anticipate salary savings that we've seen over the past several years, build that into our budget and present something that was probably more evenly aligned with expenditures and revenues. But that's just a guessing game as opposed to realizing it at the end of a fiscal year. So the revenues, of course, like you've stated, sales tax, our TOT revenue, a number of things have come in quite a bit higher than we anticipated. Interest revenue was through the roof this year, which has not been the norm in my career also. So things like that have attributed to this huge fund balance of $6.8 million.
Okay, thank you. And I don't disagree with Supervisor Howard. I think that when we have these little pockets of potentially additional funding or revenue savings, we should be going and putting that toward our future. And I think that's the health of this county depends on it. So I fully support what he's saying. I don't know that we're going to do that today, but I think that we need to start thinking about that, as well as I'm going to always kind of push for some protected or reserved reserves. So, we have 300,000, I think, in protected reserves right now. I'd like to see us grow that to about 1 million at some point, just for those rainy days. We're in blue skies right now, but we need to think about the storms.
One of the things the board did proactively to address some of that stuff as far as the unfunded liability is concerned is the pension policy that you adopted this year. In that, one of the mechanisms is doing a percentage of payroll that goes directly to pensions and other unfunded liabilities. So that really comes from the direction of the board also. If we ever want to build in a 1% or a 2% or a 3% across the board in county budgets to go towards that unfunded liability, that's an option this board approved.
And those are the tools that I recommend, and I really believe that we have to employ going forward, because unfunded liability, these liabilities that we have assumed these are the guarantees and the promises that we made to our employees over the long term, that they would have the benefits when it comes time for their severance and retirement. And that's a promise that we need to work hard to keep, and how that process is, unfortunately, through CalPERS is one that is constantly evolving and changing, and the burden always seems to grow. When they don't make their numbers, they make sure they make their numbers on the backs of cities and counties, and so it is an escalating cost that we bear, but it's something that we have to prepare for and try to whittle down and make those percentages so that we become fully vested, fully funded, where we currently aren't. And so as we go forward, that's definitely, I agree that we need to build a rainy day reserve. And these are all things that we've discussed and are part and party now to our long-term strategy plan. What that looks like and how it's visioned is going to be the real quest as we go forward. I want to, as we try to put this one to bed, I do want to thank our staff, our personnel, our board, because we've done things this year far different than have been done in the past. We've worked more closely, I believe, in this whole budget process with much more clarity and understanding, and with a vision towards having objectable, marketable, measurable metrics that we want to see done, that has not been done in the past. And it's been a change in the process, and I appreciate all the department heads that have embraced this change in this process. And going forward, I think we've placed ourselves in a better position as we move forward. And I want to just thank all the staff and all the department heads and electeds for taking part and party and coming on board and allowing this budget going forward to reflect quite a bit of a different path for us going forward. Thank you. Do we have a motion?
I will move to approve.
I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Pull the vote, please.
Supervisor Borges.
Yes.
Supervisor Howard.
Yes.
Supervisor Short.
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey.
Yes.
Chair Wilson.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you. We are adjourned.